And hello again, everybody. Thankfully, I have fixed finally all of the audio issues, so hopefully, partway through the recording, when I'm editing it, it doesn't turn out the audio spiked partway through and screwed up everything.
Hopefully.
This is Saker back once again with Axe, and as said in the last video, we're coming back to take a break from watching way too much Yuki all at once to talk about a slight thing. As I've already established before,
Unfortunately, I have not watched.
we
Unfortunately, I have not yet to watch most of Arc 2 yet.
we've been busy
Mostly
with life.
because I just haven't felt like it because I watched so much of it at once.
It happens. It's like life. But as I have previously established, I, for one, write mostly as a hobby. I don't get paid to do it because I have never, ever considered the idea of like a Patreon for writing my fan fictions, despite the fact those exist. But I do write those, and prone to ideas as I tend to be, and with a show as somewhat problem-fueled at times as ZeXal, I couldn't help but cook up an idea to how to fix it, and Axe joined in on that. So we're here to do a kind of semi how we would sort of fix ZeXal slash what story we would potentially
Honestly,
like to see out of it.
Part of it, because again, it's like I more take this as a rework instead of just a rewrite. Because considerably, up to the point I have seen so far, as the person that's not seen all of it, I can see where there are issues, but I don't see actual problems. I just see things I disagree with. But I would say the one I guess the one thing, really good thing about ZeXal is that it stays. A lot of its issues comes from a very specific thing that they're trying to stay connected to, is that Yuma and the main cast are 13-year-old kids, and because of it, it's all kind of shaped in the logic of a 13-year-old kid that plays card games.
Yeah.
And it shows in that regard. Because of that, though, it leads to a lot of other weird logic gaps.
And again, to keep in mind, this is all just based on opinions and conjecture. Everyone has their opinions about this show. Like, over in Japan, it's actually pretty popular. Over here in the West, not so much. And while I am inclined to agree,
great.
it's one of the... I am inclined to, as I've stated my opinion, I don't think ZeXal is that bad, but it's definitely one of the weaker entries within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Mythos so far. It was a hard act to follow after 5Ds, let's put it that way.
I mean, as someone that liked the first half of 5Ds and thought the second half was kind of trashy, but okay.
Well, true.
Mostly because I thought they were going to have a cool arc about cults and psychic, and like have like an actual female protagonist and then actually have people in a relationship, but like they couldn't because how Japan handles their voice actors.
Yeah, true. 5Ds did have its production issues, but to get to the point before we spend
because the backlog for everything they did last minute.
Yeah,
it was all last minute.
Oh yeah, no, that was all pretty last minute.
Fair enough.
But to get into it, basically how we're going to handle talking this, like with the analysis, we're going to take this relatively arc by arc, more or less, just to both keep work more consistent without like keeping a certain focus. That way we can talk about particular ideas as we go, without like going, oh, here's what we would do in this episode with this individual moment at time, because that's way too meticulous for anyone to do.
And that's script writing, not
that's script writing.
We're doing an idea board here instead of a script writing, which is a separate thing. Because if we want to do that, that's something I guess you could throw money at Psyker to just actually work on over a few years. Because maybe he'd try. I'd like to see him try, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, no. So basically, the structure of these, not of these freaking idea board videos, are basically going to be...
I wouldn't say these are like...
For the first one,
they're not re-reviews?
No, we're not re-reviewing everything. We're more taking off the basis of what we've already talked about.
It's not a re-review, it's a rework.
Yeah. So instead, we're basically just taking this first one is just, well, it's an idea board, as Axe said, so we're just making ideas as we go, and then we discuss them here, and try to parse the viability of such an idea to begin with.
And also, when we get to later arcs and we talk about those, it's probably going to be about us compounding those ideas and how to think of different moments and like interesting moments and maybe how to like make it cool presentation. And also, or just see what moments are like we really liked from those arcs and be like, what should we try to keep and what should we try to build upon because it could have been done more with.
Yeah, some of that as well, because I will definitely say part 2 with the Barians does
we're gonna
have
make a lot
some
of
of that.
baseline ideas here.
Yeah, this first part is mostly going to be our baseline
again?
ideas, and then some of like what we would be tweaking potentially within the first part of the show, within the first arc. But like what I was saying earlier was part 2 with the Barians definitely has some of that. You could have done a bit more.
Yeah, there's probably going to be more like as production is reaching an end and the series is getting long and the production is getting spread thin. There's probably more moments where there's actual just leaps and moments where it's like this feels like it was rushed.
Yeah.
Like, so far the show hasn't felt rushed. It's just felt like it's been handled actually kind of well for what it is. But again, it's in my mind it's limited. As someone that watches a lot of Toku, who basically I watch a lot of Tokusatsu, which means to me
I do as well.
A show can be done aimed for kids. It also still be written well for adults.
The same holds true for some Western cartoons as well. Like, I know it's cliche at this point, but Avatar: The Last Airbender. Everyone says it because
that show's meant to be timeless.
Yes, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a point. There's a reason it's a cliche to point to Avatar: The Last Airbender and say, good example of a mature kids show. But yes, so
because it's a kid story it's a story about teenagers dealing with a world crisis. So
yes, so to basically start off with this video, we're gonna start from the basis of any good story, the characters. To just get it out of the way, we're not going to use Yuma, mostly because
Yuma is his own character.
Yes,
I actually like Yuma.
Him. Yeah, no, not because we dislike Yuma. I don't think he's that bad, but because Yuma's story is basically fine as it is. So I don't think there's a need to just
very specific and very done way based off him being 13.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a need to like take Yuma and change him drastically because his story kind of works, to be totally honest.
I won't put the points
yes,
to
yes,
make this actually.
Yes,
yes. I really like his story. The thing is, though, is part of his story is very much attached to him being 13 years old, and there's a later point about that how because of that we can't really use him.
Yeah,
we'll get there in a moment, but
yes,
the original story is about him being a 13-year-old kid that can't play card games and is a stubborn as fuck.
Yeah, basically. So to bypass that, we have a different character meant to fill
also, it's why his deck is also a jumbled mess all the time.
Yeah, true. So to fill that role in, we do have a different character, an original character. Oh, do not steal, to quote the meme. In this case, by the name of Yuki Tsukumo, to run the basic bit of every Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist having the character for play in their name.
It's also
thus it keeps to that.
It's also, if anyone here has ever actually played the any of like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games, it's more that kind of idea of you are playing a transient protagonist character.
Yes, basically.
But we've taken a lot of like Yuma's places, but like I guess to actually put this off. Before we get into, I guess, how you think of Yuki as a character, because this is more heavy on your end.
Yes,
I also want to talk about like certain ideas about deck design. Because deck design is actually a part of the character. Kind of thing. But before that, there's this thing of we are shifting the ages because again, ZeXal is a show that is very much centric because it is about a 13-year-old kid and how he kind of how the world is kind of tinted by him being 13 years old,
and thus how he kind of grows up.
Because of that, yes, and how he grows as a person, because it's like 13 to 15 is like the Japanese idea of become when you mature.
Yes.
So we kind of shifted to being like, if we shift a lot of characters of the 13 age group up to about like 16 to 17. So basically changing from middle school to high school, and depending if like, we're basically making all the kids older, and then some people like a year or two older. For example, like Kaito's like 18, 19, he may be 20. There's not much of a difference really.
Yeah,
it just so there's a kind of consistent age distance between certain characters.
Yeah, basically. In a way, that idea of aging the characters up gives and
also because we actually have decent examples of how some of the characters would look older.
Yeah, it gives more flexibility, I would say, because when you're operating with older characters, you kind of understand why they'd have a bit more agency to do the things they do. There's a lot of situations in ZeXal where you're looking at it and you're like, why would you let a 13-year-old kid do this? Like, ever?
They're 16, you can kind of see them get like run away and do it on their own time because they can kind of figure it out.
And like the adults around them probably trust they have the autonomy to, handle themselves. For the most part.
If ZeXal takes place in Japan, also just thinking about bringing it up. In Japan, it's an extremely safe actually country when it comes to actually like, because most dangers are more about nature and self-pain and the crushing of being in a company, but that's a different topic. So, being a kid just walking around, as long as you have supervision or have your friends and are not alone.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're like at least 13 and are with someone, you're perfectly fine.
And it's kind of why like young kids are trusted to walk to school on their own without their parents, whereas in the United States you'd be seen as a freaking insane person for allowing a 7-year-old to walk to school by themselves.
I remember that like in I think it's like Sweetness and Lightning, where they do that, but like in that series, like even she was like 7, but the point is that like even then it was really bad because she did it without her dad telling her, so it's like he was panicking. But like that's a whole thing about trust.
Yeah,
that's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing of like trust between parent and child. But it also in some ways I think allows for just more well not no, I mean, yeah, no, we already went into the whole flexibility. So the whole point of just everyone's a bit older, so obviously also this means some of the characters would realistically perhaps either fit their senses of maturity better. Because like, for example, Shark, in my opinion, works better as a slightly older character because he feels like he would be more mature instead of like a.
I really feel like he wouldn't look. I feel like he wouldn't look different. I think he'd just be like a little bit taller.
He'd probably be a bit taller.
Like he'd probably just be like a few meters taller, but I think that's it. I don't think he'd look different.
Katori definitely works out as like if she was older, then her more down to earth, mature sense of things definitely works. As you're going to say?
Oh, because we have seen what their parents look like and also some of their older siblings look like, we have a good idea of what they'd look like older anyway.
Yeah, so we there's a sense of things, since they, this is a show where, the characters' parents aren't mysteriously absent for some reason.
No, they're just not around because their kids doing dumb things.
Yeah, no.
They're just, their parents have jobs.
Yeah. So, on to Yuki himself. To put it one thing, as we said earlier, he's kind of like the stand-in of the transient Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game protagonist of the character who's just kind of there, like for example, in the Tag Force games, where Red Hat, as many people call him, has a backstory that kind of just depends on who he's talking to in that run of the game, more or less. Tag Force Special, for example, the last Tag Force game they made before, I guess, the series died, because of the fact it goes through, like, the entire series, it really leans into that Red Hat's backstory is dependent on which character route you choose to play. Which, could get weird.
Like, are you part of the psychic cult? Are you part of the satellite? Are you a cop kind of thing? I guess like that.
Yeah, kind of like that. In this case, where Yuki obviously kind of stands in for Yuma, he even uses a mostly similar deck. To start off with that, since his deck is important, Yuki doesn't play pure automats. Okay, sure. Before we get to Yuki's.
Before we get that, because there's a whole thing about the evolution of his deck that we'll talk about just as an example, and be like, we'll probably bring up specific moments of like when new shit is added to his deck and what gets changed, because that's important to the series as a whole, because that's part of your character growth.
Yeah, we'll go over how Yuki's deck changes as time goes on.
As a thing, I want to bring up like about a visual design where it's like, because Akari, or I think it's Akari.
Yes, Akari.
Akari.
Akari is the
Akari
English
where
dub.
Right, which is weird. But Akari is like I think the reason we talked about a whole bit is that Yuki's thing is that his hair kind of looks like Utopia.
Yeah, we basically talked about it that like design wise.
Akari has her father's gene.
Yes, basically where Akari took after their dad, Yuki took after their mom, and so visually design wise is kind of meant to be like Utopia as a kid, as like a 16-year-old kid. So he kind of has some of those design cues to him. Like, his color scheme is mostly like
there's probably some bits of Utopia roots.
Yeah, it's like yellows and whites compared to Yuma's reds and blacks and also white.
The weirdest thing is like Yuki would also have some blacks because
as contrast.
Because later eventually once he gets like the rays,
yeah,
he'll probably have some like he'll probably start wearing some black shirts.
probably something like that. So. Before we get into Yuki's idea, like, as a character, we'll talk about his deck, since that also matters a lot. Yuki doesn't exactly play pure automats, mostly because Yuki is not a bad duelist. Which is one of the bits, because he's sort of meant to contrast Yuma in some ways. And so, Yuki is not only not a bad duelist, he kind of knows how to build a deck.
As someone that plays a lot of excuse decks, we've pulled it from how... Also, because Yuma exists in a series where, like, also in the manga, there's a lot of really good rank 4 cards. and also most of his decks basically are playing rank 4. So what if we just took that and just do the thing of like, there's a bunch of other rank 4s that exist that aren't numbers. Yeah. They're just also really good.
Yuki's deck is, and I even made the deck that I would think he'd run before getting numbers in Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro. Basically, it's rank 4 spam, where the main body of the main deck monsters is the automats, because they're pretty easy to spam and level modulate in case he needs to throw anything out. But most of his extra deck is all various rank 4s. Either it's all the Gagaga Xyz monsters, he just has those off the bat, because I'm basically running the idea that we're gonna modernize like everybody else's deck.
Yeah, we're gonna probably bring up Go Glove and Babancha Coat, because those are bridge cards that actually make the decks consistent and actually do things.
Yes. So initially, and again, we'll talk about it as we go. Initially, Yuki's first duel on screen would be him playing like pure rank 4 spam, and even throughout, he'd be using various other rank 4s aside from Utopia, because, Yuma's main strategy in the show is go into Utopia and maybe another number depending on the situation.
On the topic of that, I want to bring up, though, is that for that sake of that, we kind of want to bring up the point of, outside of like the actual moment of ZeXal and the Shining Draw, we want to be that there is like, Yuki does not, outside of like 1 or 2 cases, never actually draws a lucky card. He depends on how his deck building is good.
The magic poker equation does not come to him that often. Aside from like narrative ideas of having Yuki start with a hand. It only comes
literally when it's actually a power he's activating.
In some cases, I mean, obviously, if I was writing this for the plot's sake, I'd be like, what would be Yuki's opener hand? Like, within context of the duel, what would be the best starting setup for him to play with to, add to the tension or the drama? Because obviously, when you're writing a duel, it's different from normally playing one.
It also, the topic is that he'd just be playing traps that aren't weirdly specific.
Oh yeah, no, Yuki plays a lot of staple spells and trap cards, like a lot like, say, Revolver and Friends. He runs Mirror Force and Magic Cylinder, basically just to give people a middle finger every now and again.
I think you could, depending on stuff, you could probably get rid of Magic Cylinder, because that doesn't helpful as much.
Probably,
but
yeah.
Mirror Force is always good.
Yes. So basically, the core of Yuki's deck is always going to be like pure, is going to be rank 4 spam, but the idea of narrative is, as it goes, he progressively shifts into like more straight up Utopia support kind of oriented stuff. But again, we'll talk about that as we go on, since, again, modernizing the decks basically. And we'll talk about other characters' decks.
I will say the one thing that's important to bring up.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to bring up, though, is that he will, as he gets Utopia, there is at least one card, I think, because we don't want him to depend on drawing double or nothing as a card.
Yes.
I also kind of want to bring up the idea of side decking. But before that, I want to bring up, there is a card called Utopia Double, which is basically a card that you rank 4 into that then goes into Utopia itself as a separate thing. But it searches double or nothing.
Yep.
It also doubles Utopia's attack.
It's basically it's basically meant to be a game winner setup, since depending on how you do it, you can bring out Utopia with like fucking 10,000 by doing the double or nothing combo.
Doing the whole combo, you can do that. Yes.
Yes.
So it's why I think that doing the thing of being that the game later designs actual cards for anime moments to happen. Why don't we just let that work out? Because those cards in most modern Yu-Gi-Oh, or at the time, were not great, even though like Utopia's thing is that they just have the biggest attack ever.
Yeah, basically. And in terms of modernizing decks, as I said, when we get to like other duels or other certain characters as we go on, we'll talk about them and like what cards exist now due to later supports that we could talk about. Like, as Axe has mentioned, water decks have always been good. And in the ensuing years in ZeXal, sharks have gotten a lot of support. So
a lot of times, actually, the latest cards that resisted are just some of the cards that existed in the beginning of the series of Shark, like that weird Skullkraken.
Yeah. So there's some fun to talk about. Plus, we could also talk about Kaito and frickin' all the goddamn Galaxy support that's come out in the ensuing years. Frickin' hell.
I played Galaxy, so I understand where it goes. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. Honestly, I don't want to. This is a random thought. I don't want to give him Afterglow Dragon because I don't want to give him the ability to play Photon Prime and then just hit for 16k damage. Or no, I want him to hit for 11k 200 damage.
Oh
Because
man.
I think doing that, but also having a thing where you can then hit you after pitching after go, you also summon a Galaxy on board so he can hit for like over 14k
Oh
damage.
jeez.
I think that's not good. The card came out in 2020. Point is,
Oh,
though, it's a
that's a
really good card
very
when you
new
play
card.
Galaxy, though. It's really good for single like one hit KOing your opponent.
Yeah.
But I think giving it to Kaito is not helpful because it also beats over a full combo Utopia.
Oh yeah, that's true. So as for Yuki's character as a whole, again, like his playstyle as a duelist, he's kind of meant to contrast Yuma. Where Yuma is your hot-headed, kind of stubborn sort, Yuki is very relaxed, laid back. He's competitive enough, but he's not like constantly aiming to be the best. The whole idea of like, oh, become the dual king is more something that happens as a consequence of the plot rather than an actual desire of his.
And honestly, I think it's part of the growth as he grows to become someone that wants a thing. Like he
Yeah.
grows to be like, I want to do this because I'm not doing this because I'm asked to. I'm doing this because I want to.
Yes. Basically, the idea is he's the guy that you know could probably play at a national level, but chooses to just keep hanging out at the locals, having fun with everybody because he just kind of can't bring himself to care enough, despite the fact he knows how to build a deck, knows how to play the decks, and could very well kind of get somewhere with it. Which this is actually kind of important too.
He could probably at least. I feel like he's the person that always would reach it to like top 8, top 4, but
Yeah.
maybe not top unless he actually like got really sweaty.
Yeah. This, of course, is also kind of important to another idea because, compared to, well, we have plenty of ideas too for like character links and relations between one another. So that's kind of our basic for Yuki. He plays a good game, but he starts off the story very kind of pulled back from that competitive spirit compared to like most other Yu-Gi-Oh protagonists. He's kind of closer to Yusei and Yusaku, where it's not really the competitive drive to be the best that pushes him forward. It's more the consequences of other things around him that pushes him to kind of become the best by pure coincidence and consequence.
Honestly, by it becomes being a more character-driven motivation, and also then becomes about I must become the strongest to survive.
Yeah, basically, because oh boy. And then getting further, obviously, moving on then from Yuki to talk about his links to other characters compared to Yuma. How about we start with the one I think is the more interesting to talk about, Yuki and Shark's relationship, because this one matters a lot to the plot compared to.
I also we also like slightly bring up like Tetsuo hasn't.
Oh yeah.
No, sir. I just want to briefly also bring up like I think his relationship with Tetsuo hasn't really changed. They're just kind of older now and just kind of more directly confrontational with each other.
To get that out of the way, yeah, Tetsuo and Yuki are very much just the typical Yu-Gi-Oh buddies. It's not that much of a different relationship with Yuma, but it's a bit more. They've had a few more years to mature and kind of settle down the roughhousing and not be as snippy with each other over certain things because, you know, being dumb 13-year-olds.
There are points in the series where Tetsuo is very much like loses his trust in Yuma. I feel like that wouldn't apply with Yuki because Yuki, I feel like in the points of the show where that matters is that Yuki doesn't really change his deck that much.
Yeah, no.
Outside of very, I would get it because he doesn't change his main deck.
Yeah, no. So getting into what I said, Yuki's relationship with Shark, because this one is vastly different from where it is with Yuma, is within the idea, the first time Shark would appear in the narrative is not the first time Yuki would have met Shark in universe. The two actually used to know each other a long time ago when they were like younger kids, but as they got older and moved through life and things happened, they just kind of drifted apart as some friends do, and the various successive incidents in their life caused them to kind of hit a point of being almost unable to reconcile with each other. Like, you know, Shark growing to just be kind of a shitty asshole. And Yuki just kind of not really having much of a competitive drive. Yeah, so that kind of drives the conflict. Like, for example, it's just kind of like that initial concept. Like, my idea in, like, this initial meeting, narratively speaking, is, like, Yuki snipes at Shark, and like in a very Japanese-style detached way. Like, he doesn't refer to Shark by name; he just calls him Senpai, as sort of to show how detached he feels with his old friend, and just kind of tells him off for like using the.
It also probably a thing of when I first meet him is that Shark. I was gonna wonder if, just because this comes to mind to me, I kind of want to bring up, I guess, the crux of maybe what caused their relationship to fall apart is Shark, I guess, getting disqualified.
Yeah, something along those lines. That was kind of
Just
the
like
idea I
I have
had
an
too.
idea of like how that would work better and probably have more impact. But
Yeah,
I really image the first time you see Shark in this version is that he beats Tetsuo using some kind of one of the many shark monsters that exist because sharks are kind of scary.
Yes.
But
and then it's that same incident where he beats Tetsuo and takes his deck via the anti-rule, and then you have Yuki show up and kind of snipe at him about like,
I don't know if you want to do it, but like, do you think? It's like you don't. It's like you don't give away your shit like that because it's hard to get those cards.
Yeah, no, but just some of that talk too. Like the opening conversation is basically meant to foreshadow that former relationship with Yuki's cold method of referring to him and kind of calling him out for using the anti-rule to take decks when that's probably considered kind of poor practice in universe. Plus, Shark just kind of acting like a dick, and then Shark brings up how Yuki could be more competitive himself, but doesn't have the guts to do it. So the early part of this relationship
like in this
is very much these two have a lot of initial antagonism due to various past incidents that were admittedly kind of out of each other's control, but slowly come to get over that and eventually reconcile as it goes.
I think also because I think we've talked about this somewhat before, but I think there's also probably some like later layers involving his sister.
Yes.
But before that, there is at least a thing I think of.
There's
probably more of a way you can double down more on Shark being fitting up to his namesake of being that he is the pun surfing in the water till he tastes blood to hunt it down.
Yeah.
So I think you could do the thing of like he's hunting down weak people, and I don't know if we want to do it, but like if we want to actually have like some level of violence in the show, because the people are somewhat older.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like you could do a thing of Shark has his goons like hold Tetsuo down to like kick him in the stomach a butt to like be like, I win, now give me your deck.
Yeah, it could be something like that.
It's like, because I feel like you could do a lot of Tetsuo refuses and like Shark literally has to force it out of him.
Oh yeah, no, and of course like we're bringing it up, but this also but like this whole relationship with Shark also comes into play to one of the rank 4s that Yuki plays in his deck because again, he plays rank 4 spam, so he doesn't care that much about archetype and more so what's a useful rank 4 I could have in the deck. Just to say it now, this particular rank 4 is Evil Swarm or Boris. So there's a reason he has this card.
Because it's honestly as someone that plays the rank 4 deck, there's not actually that many payoff cards outside of stuff that's actually very like outside of like Dark Rebellion, Excuse Dragon, or what was that card? Is that's an Arc 5 card.
That's Arc 5, so that's
it's
entirely
like some of the better ones is also Utopia cards like Utopia the Lightning and Shining Utopia and like Utopia Prime, which are not
and even then narratively
later
speaking,
in the series
Yuki
anyway.
would not have those until way later. So
so it's like there's just a lot of specific cards that like he can't run. So he's only got to run very specific things. Like it's like as someone that runs a rank 4 machine deck because I run gadget stuff. So like everyone go in Silver Gadget, which doesn't come out till like the movie, so you can't run that. Even though technically you probably could because
you could make an excuse for it, probably.
But no, there's a thing, but the concept in execution is that there are just not so many cards, and it's like honestly, I think like by the time you probably considering how many cards, if you can't use other number monsters that are rank 4s, he'd only have like 10 extra deck cards because there aren't that many that exist.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the thing too. It's like keeping ideas. Part of it is also because we want to keep the idea that Yuki has ways he can play around numbers without having to rely on just going into another numbers itself. Because again, keep in mind, as we
at least have Evil Swarm. He'd at least have like very.
The narrative idea behind Yuki having some of the evil swarms is very much to represent the darker side to his personality, like what happens when he's genuinely intent on winning a duel.
Like there's the thing of that our hero here, or I guess not our hero, but our protagonist here he's a calm person, but it's also because inside there's also like this dark urge to win at all costs, no matter what.
And partly, like,
which I think is a thing that reflects into like using like cards that would be mostly only villain cards in the show. And also because it's also kind of fitting of a lot of Yuki protagonists because like if you look at the original series and also of later seasons, at least in Arc 5, they end up becoming like very dark fuckers. So like, why
Oh yeah,
not
no.
just kind of hint? Why not hint at that, but not go all the way? Because
Keep
that's
in
not the
mind,
point.
freaking Yuya playing freaking Odd Eyes Raging Dragon. Holy shit. That moment that has gone down in infamy.
I also know the thing about just the Zark is just Space Satan.
Yes, Space Satan Zark.
But that's I don't know much about it, so like that's more just the point of what I know about it from people who talked about it with me. But
we'll talk about it more as the narrative goes on.
I guess just key cards to bring up is like Gaga Samurai, Gaga Cowboy.
Yeah, Yuki does. They're in the
Castiel,
show.
the Sky Blasting Musketeer.
Oh yeah, no. Castiel basically as like the ultimate screw your numbers. I'm getting it off the board.
Also, Steelstorm Roach as just come at me, I dare you.
Oh yeah, basically.
The weirdest thing though is also we can also have fun with the thing is that depending on certain characters, they might not actually read cards because there's also depending on sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh there is a weird thing that it's almost like a stand ability where a monster's card does not have effects until someone announces them.
Yeah, basically. To get back to like finish what I was saying again, we'll talk more about some of the cards Yuki particularly chooses. Like we'll explain why it is Yuki has Ouroboros when it becomes like a relevant segment to talk about, like to his and Shark's past relationship. But so just kind of keep that in mind. Yuki's possession of Ouroboros is actually kind of important to that plot point, and not just we gave it to him because we thought it'd be cool. So there's that, and then from there, of course, the second, obviously, probably the second most important character relationship would, of course, be Astral, which, again, this is very much meant to contrast how Yuma's relationship with the character is, where Yuma and Astral take quite a fair bit of time to
Yuki doesn't... They do, but it becomes a thing of... I feel like in this case, it's like... Yuki, I don't think ever, like, opens up to him easily, but he never stubbornly tries to treat him like an asshole.
Yeah, no. Like, he snipes at Astral not to tell him what to do in a duel, usually because when Astral makes a call, Yuki was just about to do that exact same fucking thing himself, and it just kind of annoys the crap out of him.
I also think you could do... I feel like you could do a moment of being like, or, that's too much of a defensive play, that's not going to win us. We're not going to win the game.
Yeah, basically, part of the contrast is meant to be because, as does get established in show, Astral is a very defensive duelist. He's not exactly one to go on the offensive a whole lot when he does duel. He's very cautious, he's very careful. Yuki, on the other hand, kind of knows when he can be aggressive in a duel, and when he can be allowed to, like, take the offensive and go all out. So, like, sometimes, say, Astral would call, oh, do this. Yuki would say, no, that's too defensive, and we'd lose a chance. So, where Astral kind of occasionally backseats Yuma until Yuma, properly grows as a duelist and actually learns some strategy, Astral and Yuki more occasionally bounce back and forth on what's better right now, to be defensive, to be cautious, or to
feel like
take a risk.
Moments. I feel like because there would be some cool moments in that being like Yuki and Astral arguing over if the opponent's trap card is actually going to do a thing.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, okay, what's the face down and what could it do?
It's like, if it's a battle negate, it doesn't matter because we'll just keep going through it because we have double nothing. I searched literally the previous turn just in case. So, and it's like, what's the point of them to play destruction because we already have, because it's like, we just need to make sure that we have some destruction removal or some protection. So we just need to make sure that our negate on that we set actually does a thing.
Yeah, basically. So the relationship between the two is definitely less
more into like
combative,
moment to moment, like it becomes more about arguing strategists instead of two dudes stuck in one body doing a sword fight.
Yeah, basically like that. So, which I think both dynamics have their merits, and I do think they're pretty fun. Astral and Yuma do have their fun moments, but it's also just a fun idea to have it where, both of them are good at strategy, but they argue over what strategy should be employed and when. So it creates some dynamics there.
Also, because if we go with the idea that Yuki can play negates, it's also a thing about it's about having to break a board, or like, how do I get around this? Or being like, okay, so we do this, and then we'll draw a card, We just have to make sure we draw an actual monster, then we'll do the play. If we don't draw a monster, we're fucked, but we gotta do this anyway, otherwise we have to wait 5 turns to do nothing.
I will absolutely say this kind of difference change will definitely make, like, Astral's duel with Kaido near the end of this arc, like, pretty interesting, because he's playing with a deck that's obviously more well-built than what Yuma has on hand most of the time, so what would Astral be preferring to attempt to play? Would he, what would he rely on more than Yuki would with a similar deck to play, basically? So that would create for some interesting moments as well. So there's plenty to do with that.
Yeah.
And then
also, just this is a weird side thing. I image it because Yuki probably doesn't have 15 like extra deck monsters at the time that he could he gets new cards put in there, so he notices when there's more cards in there. Or also the thing of all of like the Utopia combo cards are now in his side deck, which means all of his side deck is now missing and somewhere else.
Which you would very obviously ask Astral about, like, bro, what the fuck happened to my side deck? At least let me put the cards back in the freaking box I keep them in.
I feel like that could be a reoccurring bit of him finding his side deck cards across the series. It's like I feel like it'd almost be a visual gag of like Yuki having to empty his side deck when Astral comes out.
That'd make for something amusing, probably. And then as for probably, definitely like the third character we should talk about in terms of like important relationships, at least at this point, because I do want to talk about some more stuff like when Rio, Shark's sister, comes into play. There's some stuff to talk about there, but again, that most of that loops back into the Yuki and Shark subplot to begin with. So whenever things become relevant. So obviously,
I want to bring
Katori.
up like I do want to bring up at least some of those bits, but yeah.
Yeah. So right now, though, obviously moving into Katori. So again, as the show kind of establishes, Katori clearly has some affections for Yuma, but kind of in the doesn't feel a need to be active about it because she just enjoys being around her friends and supporting them.
It's also the thing that they're both 13-year-old kids in the show, so it's very different.
Yeah.
It's also being like, there is very much at least, which I will say, in a lot of shows, I have never actually seen like this much of a consistently actually strong emotional bond between two people, like in a like quiet but understandable way. Mm-hmm. Like that's actually kind of rare where it's like, oh, there is an actually legitimately strong emotional bond here that's like consistent in a back and forth and like there's mutual respect there.
And it doesn't even need to be romantic in nature is the thing too with that bond as we see is like because part of that is Yuma's a dumb 13-year-old, so obviously he doesn't quite see it, but it's that kind of trust you get from longtime friends, which is nice to see in a show, and they don't constantly use it as romance.
It's honestly, yeah. Yeah, it's a thing of like, if I think they were older, I think it's a thing where it's like, it could be either or. Yeah. It's just a thing of being like, there is at least a strong emotional trust thing, so it's like, it being in the open, it's like, I feel like the show, like in this version, it could be vague about it, or it could just be they don't directly talk about it, because it could just be a thing of like, actually a personal level, they just don't want to talk about it, even though they may.
The basic idea too is because of Yuki's much more down to earth nature.
You could play with it. You could make it kind of vague, but sorry, I thought you were saying something.
No. As I was saying, basically the contrast here is where Katori basically gets onto Yuma to try and help him get in line because of his stubborn and often reckless attitude. Yuki's more down-to-earth nature means him and Katori kind of vibe together a bit more. Like, they often come to the same conclusions about things. They have the same general ideas, even though Yuki's competitive streak does occasionally get to him. So
there'd also probably be moments about Katori showing that she understands Yuki more than other people.
Yeah.
Where it's like, he understands kind of like some of his emotional complexities. So it's like, when you see his darker moments, like she can be there to like kind of explain it to the other hearts of the audience.
Yeah, like, oh shit, wait, I didn't know he had that card in his deck, what the hell? And she's like, yeah, no, he's always had that. Like, again,
or it's like,
narratively speaking, Yuki, I think narratively speaking, Yuki wouldn't like pull out Ouroboros until a few duels in, just to kind of keep the fact he owns that kind of on the low. And then when he pulls it out, it's meant to be like, oh, fucking shit, what?
Because like in the format of Yu-Gi-Oh, like there's escalation and then like the sense of scale, and because Ouroboros is a good card, but it's also not the best. It's not also the easiest to get out sometimes, but it's also it's also a thing of like as he gets more Utopia cards, or I guess Hope cards, number 39 cards, I guess I put it. When he gets more number 39 or various stuff involving.
Again, I just use Utopia because I prefer it. So I just say Utopics or Utopia, whatever.
Fair enough. Utopia has a better name for it. I think I like how it's said in anime.
Yeah, no, in the show it is kind of fun whenever
it gets more
VW
stuff.
Yeah.
But also when it gets more Z stuff, it's different.
Yeah, the idea is Yuki actually kind of incorporates some of that stuff into his deck. Not a lot of it, as we have discussed. In real life, Utopia Ray is kind of a bad card.
It's kind of a bad card because the weirdest thing though is because in the duels in the show, everyone gets 1,000 life points. But we'll get to that back because I want to get to that later. I want to go back to the Katori moment of
yes.
She's always consistently there. It's also being like, I don't care that she doesn't duel. I think that it's fine she doesn't because she's one of the smartest characters in the show. She's also a character that like Yuma risks his life for continuously, and also as shown in the show, I feel like it's a thing that like that is fine. She doesn't need to duel. She doesn't ever need to.
Just to say,
I think it's cool that she's just a person that maybe is implied to be into robots.
Yeah. Just to say it though, I would say, because I want to carry a bit from the manga, I would say she owns a deck, not because she's actually interested in dueling, but because duelists get into Heartland for free. This is legit a bit from the manga. Katori has a deck. We never see what's in it in the manga, but she has it because it's basically a free ticket into Heartland, and apparently tickets to get into that place are pretty freaking expensive otherwise.
I mean, it's a really fancy amusement park.
Yeah, so it's a funny bit from the manga that I want to keep. That Katori has a deck, but it's purely for a practical purpose.
Honestly, I think we could. I mean, we're just to a weird idea. I've talked about with you. We talked about this in pre-show before. Mm-hmm. A deck I really like playing that never gets showed up in the show is Geargia. It's actually a really, or at least rank 4 machines, Gadget, Geargia, so on. I really like the machine decks, and like I play a lot of them. And it's like I have yet to play rank 10 terrains, but that's also a good deck of its own limitations. It's a bit clunky, but it's fun.
Yes, but again, that's a deck owned by someone in universe, and we'll talk about Anna when we get to her.
Rank 4 machines though is not a card because the closest one it gets is not a deck actually shown because the closest one is Tetsuo, who doesn't play that. He plays a spell counter deck of sorts.
Yeah, it's like freaking.
Well, he plays a lot of really good machine cards, but he doesn't use their effects.
No, he plays a different kind of machine deck.
So like. Yeah, he plays a counter deck.
Though he does have some good staples. Like, again, he has 10 Goldfish, which is...
He has 10 Goldfish, which is actually
an excellent machine staple. Is an excellent machine staple.
No, it's the rank 4s, actually.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because you summon it, you normal summon it, and it special summon rank 4, another level 4 from hand. Yeah, it's like Goblinberg, but...
Yeah, Yuki would run it. Yuki would be running that along with Goblinberg and Kage Tokage, because rank 4 materials.
Which means he also be running, like, King of the Lizards, the King of, like, the Serpents. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but he'd use it to search other Kage Tokages for rank 4 plays.
Probably, I don't know.
But the point, though, is that it means that, like, he would have... Also, I guess it goes back to where it's like Yuki would have 10 Goldfish as a gift for Tetsuo. But
yeah.
I want to bring up the point of being like, I want to have there be a character who plays Geargia. And I kind of want it to be like one of maybe possibly the many duelists, or I guess to just go back into Katori having a deck. Is that I've thought of a possible idea of idea called Geargia Girl, which is that in a reference to like if anyone's ever seen the actual Geargia story in Master Duel, is that it's very much 70s like Mazen Kaiser old Getter Robo style ham of super robots. That it's like. These Geargias, like it's a mix between Mega Man and like 70s Super Robot Cheese.
Part of this is playing off of the fact of the Obomi episode when Katori tries to name Obomi the
like,
shiny robot.
There's an entire bit that like Katori is like super into robots, which is like kind of also how she says it and also how she acts towards the robot. Kind of shows that it's like she's really into pets or she really loves robots.
It's one or the other.
One or the other, or keeping both. Both also works.
Yeah.
But like because of that, it goes to the idea that like I originally thought of an idea of Geargia Girl, which is basically a person wearing D armor instead of wearing D gazer. It's a full suit, like basically an even bigger step than what Kaito does of literally doing a henshin, which is like a girl, like a girl like 18 to 20, maybe, or like I guess 16 to 17, depending on like what angle is done with it. Mm-hmm. That wears armor and basically does a bunch of different chants with her cards as she plays Geargian X and Geargia Gear XG. as she plays basically a rank 3-4 toolbox combo deck that's all machine based.
Yeah,
She plays like Ancient Gearbox and so on and so on, where she plays a bunch of very specific cards that like Iron Call and Iron Draw and like all these very cards that combo together into a really effective way to just have a card that's mostly engine and recursion, and maybe not has the best payoff, which because like the best attack it could do is only 2,500, which means Yuki could just beat it over with Utopia.
yeah. So it's kind of something like that. It's an interesting and fun concept for a character to
like
have.
the one thing of the deck is like outside of it.
Yeah, so it's kind of a.
And the one twist about it is like I wanted to be like, is it actually Katori? Or is it just like she has a sister that just
it'd be like a joke. Katori is conveniently never around when Geargia Girl shows up. Basically,
yeah. The bit is that like Yuki thinks it's Katori, so like he sometimes jokingly flirts with her. So it's like he's just trying to get at her, but it's like, and then the bit it'd be like the deck that she brings is actually not hers, but it's the Geargia Girl deck. Is the one she brings to Heartland.
Yeah.
As a joke.
So either some kind of joke, gag, one of those two things. It's an idea to work with, definitely, and think on.
It'd be a thing of like, it's like you're not sure because there's no idea to tell. But I feel like depending on is that how I would handle it is that it actually is Katori or it's just her sister.
Yeah,
it's just her older sister who's just really into robots.
Yeah. The next biggest thing we want to talk about, and we'll probably, because of the fact that we're almost an hour in, we'll probably use this to close off, is how we would handle duels within the story, because Axe has some interesting ideas about what could be done, and there is some discussion to potentially be had, because when you're doing a narrative, again, you can have some fun. Obviously, let's establish it. We all know the reason why the TV shows always run duels at like 4,000 life points is because it means that they can run the duel relatively faster, despite the fact that, duels often get...
But also not really.
Yeah. It's kind of that weird thing of...
It makes it so very specifically manageable.
Yeah. It's meant to make the plays more manageable compared to normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like, how do I beat over 8,000 life points? Which
is surprisingly easy if you just have a full board and hit.
Oh yeah, no. I play it... As I've shown a couple times, be it like here or on Twitch, I play Code Talkers. Code Talkers can very easily, with the right play, beat over 8,000 in a classic OTK. Code Talker OTK is kind of nuts because it's a massive combo to pull off. But so
I play Galaxy, I play Thunder Dragon, I play a different thing. So it's like I've used to cards that just if you make the right board, you just have enough pops to get past your opponent, or just hit them for one hit. And if they don't have any like battle stopping or just gate to stop you, just kill them.
So a main debate would basically be, if this were to be written, the question of like 8,000 or 4,000 life points, basically, to how manageable do we want to make things.
And then also I guess the side thing of, and the other side thing is like, do you want to have more than just a single match? Which is like, because I think side decking is actually a really important thing of being. It's about the strategy against your opponent and understanding how to play against them. It also because if you're not playing in a tournament, there's no metagame to read, so you just have to have enough like generic stuff or just a different combo-based flavor in your side deck instead of just being like tech cards.
Yeah. The basic idea is like, one of the main questions we have is like, what duels could or could not realistically be matches? And the main concept comes down to number duels, because as has been established in the show, whenever a duel happens involving the numbers, if Yuma loses, Astral could potentially die. And as we've seen, if like the more numbers get pulled away from Yuma, the weaker Astral starts to get. So it's kind of a question of, well then, if we're fighting a numbers duelist, could we realistically make any of those duels be a match instead of just a single round that's pulled out? Like, for example...
I think it could, depending on very specific requirements.
Like, for example, I think the first one that made us actually ponder this was the duel against the teacher in, like, what was it, episodes 3 and 4? 4 and 5, I forget the exact ones. It was like...
Right, like the one... the one with
where,
Shockmaster.
Where, because that duel was like, he was trying to run down the clock.
Not Shockmaster, Terabyte.
Yeah, with Terabyte. Because of the fact that duel was the teacher was trying to run down the clock, the idea was, realistically, would this actually have been a match duel instead of just a single round where it's dragged out because the characters are wasting minutes at a time talking away?
Well, in this case, I mean, in some cases, it's like, yes. And it's like, it varies, and like sometimes it can be shifted, But I also think it's that if Yuki doesn't have to talk out his effects because he can just expect his opponent to read his cards, he'll just do his combo.
Yeah, we all know part of the reason why anime duels are so drawn out is because of the fact every character feels a compulsion to announce the effect.
Part of that duel is
every
because he was
time they
already
use
with
it.
Astral.
That as well. Part of
Well, it's because otherwise the effect doesn't exist. The fact that there's no effect on the card until they say it.
The rule of the anime: the effect does not exist unless you say it out loud. Or if you've said it before, then you get to say the effect activates, and then it resolves without you having to repeat it again. But that doesn't happen that often.
You sometimes also have to mention if it's once per turn.
Yes. So basically, that's like whenever we get to start talking about like the actual duels, we'll bring that up of like, could this duel realistically be turned into a match duel? Yes, no. Would it be better off as a single? Just to would that make more sense? Would it not?
It's also because I think in some cases, if it make the baseline a match format, it makes the duels that aren't match formats more special in how they're kind of weird or dangerous.
Like, even though it's way later, I'll bring it up again because I told Axon like the pre-show, the World Duel Carnival that makes up the final arc of the first half of the show is done in kind of a unique way to establish the fact that like, oh, the tournament setup for this is more. To put it very simply, it's basically a battle royale grudge match where it's just a persistent duel where you run into somebody, you'll duel them, you win, you move on. Though
it's almost like laser tag but dueling.
Yeah, basically. So, like, for example, that's kind of an interesting premise to make a duel tournament off of. I think Arc V does that too, where like you have like a big tournament where it's basically everyone's roaming around the big augmented reality
Everyone's
fields.
roaming around.
And if you run into somebody when you're moving through the field, you duel them, and if you win, the loser is eliminated from the tournament, and you get to move on and continue your thing. But somebody could show up in the middle of the duel for all you know.
Also, the weirdest thing, it also, I guess, depending if people keep their life point damage, it then becomes where it's like people are incentivized to play life point king cards.
To put it one thing actually that I remember from the episodes I got into for when that whole thing started, there were actually like a whole gimmick of, because they're on a freaking roller coaster ride, basically, that there's spell and trap cards laid around the roller coaster that activate once you come across them that can either make you lose life points or gain life points, basically. But that's just definitely a common thing. Like, for example, since we talked about it...
Gimmick duels are a very different kind of thing.
Yes. Since we talked about it in the first arc segments more and can go into it more in depth, for example, the tag duel against the brothers with Volcasaurus and the other one...
Freezer Dawn.
And Freezer Dawn. We thought out very simply that one could be a single because of the fact that the brothers cheat.
Those guys are very specific about it being like, no, it's a single match. Otherwise, we're just going to leave.
Yeah,
we're just going to go do it anyway.
Yeah, because of the fact they're blatantly cheating, they demand it to be a single instead of a match set of tag duels to determine the overall winner. Plus, narratively speaking, Axe explained this himself, is that a match duel set could actually be done to make something pretty interesting in terms of like, what plays get executed or how does the drama start to build, for example. So
because like you can have a back and forth, but also being like, okay, so what did they side deck to change it? It's like, did they change the strategy? Oh no, they changed it. They changed out their extra deck. Because he didn't have this card last time. Damn it.
Yeah, basically. Or you could do something like, for example, Yuki just freaking smashes in a 2-0 immediately, or maybe something comes out that's not expected before he gets to, like, make a proper play, and he ends up losing the first match because, the opponent freaking got lucky and whipped out a massive combo. So, you could have that, and then have
Or the thing is that, like, Yuki trounced in the first round, and then the person reworked their deck to make it that it crushes him utterly.
Yeah, basically something like that.
Because there is a card that is, I think, one of the basic would be called a war crime in Xyz format is Flying C, which is when your person summons a monster, you can summon it on their field, and then they cannot Xyz summon.
That would absolutely be a war crime in ZeXal.
It's a side card. Always run against Xyz player. It is one of the most dangerous cards ever because in ZeXal where everyone plays only Xyz monsters. This card, I think, would probably be illegal by actual rules in that setting. It might be an actually legal card because it literally just stops your opponent from playing the game.
I'm trying to actually think. The only character I think who plays non-Xyz type cards, I think, is actually Kaido. Because I think he's.
But he plays them as. He plays them as like weird one-offs, so.
Well, yeah, I think he's the only character who ever uses summoning methods other than Xyz in the show. I'll have to go through the rest of it because I think I could be wrong, but I think he's the only one who uses like fusion and ritual, like ever. Obviously, no one uses synchro because that was the last show. Yeah, so we're not going to make anyone use it.
Yeah. Also, I shared you the image of the card so you can understand what it says.
God, I love how all the C cards are basically about tiny bugs fucking looming in the middle of a goddamn normal.
They're about super ominous cockroaches. Yes.
Yes.
Eventually, they become a cool Sentai, but the shiny black C.
Yeah, that one.
But like that's ballpark, which is actually kind of a good deck, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, I do find it.
But like,
funny.
if you see here, this card is the bane of your existence if you're trying to start your C's combo.
Yeah, basically. Let's see.
Also, because eventually you just want to ram it into your opponent to get rid of it. But like,
yeah, basically.
If anyone knows what flying C's, you can look it up. But it's like it is flying C.
Yeah, I have the page open right now. Flying C. During either player's turn, when exactly one... Oh, wait, no. Shiny black C. I'm looking at that right now. Flying C.
I linked it to you in the chat, but it's like, when your opponent normal or special is a monster, except during a damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's field in defensive position. The controller of this card cannot exceed summon.
Jesus. That's... Yeah, no, that's like... If there was a ban list in freaking the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime... In the Xyz meta that is ZeXal, this would absolutely be fucking banned.
It would have this card because it literally blocks everyone in the city. Basically. It also, because the word says it blocks numbers from existing.
Oh yeah, basically. Yeah, basically just... Oh, hey.
It's like I weirdly feel like this could be like a reoccurring side thing. If there had to be filler episodes, it'd be some dude that plays this against Yuki and being like, wait, I have to somehow just beat him with like my normal summons.
which would almost be painful because being a rank 4 spam deck, it's like most of Yuki's main deck cards aren't like super strong.
He can still special cards, so he can still do it.
He just can't.
It's like they're level modulation and searchers.
He'd basically just have to frickin' go about trying to roll over what he could, or just again.
We're saying like Astro was right. It's like. You didn't know this card existed either, dude.
It's like, you didn't know this card existed until it got played. Shut up.
It's like... I also feel like it'd be a bit of like Astral gains a phobia of bugs because of it.
That could lead to something funny. So, that would definitely be a thing just to discuss.
The bit is like, it can be tributed though, but the point is though, I don't think Yuki plays it about like various deck design and meta play where it's like, I think this card would be illegal because in the format where no one plays anything, because like it works in a format where in an actual like meta format, people are playing synchros and rituals.
Yeah, they're playing various other cards, but like in this context format, this card would definitely be a fucking war crime. Actually, when did frickin' Flying C get made?
It came out when like early Xyz.
Oh, of course.
It's like 2013, I think.
Let me see. And see, it usually says when it got released. I don't know.
But on the topic of match formats, I want to bring up a thing of how I think would be interesting for how Shark got disqualified from his tournament, because I think that's actually an important thing to bring up.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
so
since we did talk about
outside of what happens to it, because
you did have your rant about how stupid that was.
But like, I mean, people can go watch that other video to see it when I talked about it.
Yeah, do forgive the weird
point about it is more of, but like, it's probably for it, but.
But no, I was just saying, forgive the weird audio because of OBS having issues at that time, which is somehow purely from my end. So that is what it is. But anyway, moving on. You and talking about the match set in regards to
the point being is like you can find out when that Flying C came out just so you can track it. But in the moment here, I want to bring up the point of how I think they should have done it where Shark does his final match, heavily wins the championship. And at the final moment where they reward the winner's trophy, it goes to the person that he beat. They don't show the guy, but it shows it basically at the end where Shark was going to win, the other guy is given the trophy or given the award or the prize money instead of him. So basically it means that they're like, he technically won, but quietly they made it till the other guy won, and no one noticed it because everyone was hyping, also because he wasn't the only one that was in the finals per Katori and stuff like that. So it's like, they have a thing where he didn't become the champion, and he quietly gets disqualified, because that's how that goes out. Because it's like only a drama thing for people that look actually into the circuit and not just casual watchers.
Yeah, basically.
So it becomes like, if you dig it up, you can find out that like he was disqualified because he supposedly cheated in his final match. But that wasn't until after he already beat the guy, which means, in the technicality, the other guy had any reason to believe that like he Dark sideboarded against him purposely.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because he knew it was in his deck.
Yeah, so that could be that could actually make for an interesting thing in terms of like duels and how they happen. Just to bring that bit of realism in. Again, within the anime format, most duels are singles because that's literally the only time they can allot to a duel. It has to be a single match because
until they have also jump cutted, which I feel like they could just do that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, jump cut through a match if you need to or whatever. Who knows? Once we do get to some duels, we'll definitely talk about that because there's definitely some moments in the show where you could definitely see if it was a match set, they'd let a character get away with some stupid bullshit luck maneuver to do
just showed the final play.
Yeah, to do like some bullshit OTK. Like you brought up the example, the Star Robin guy. I'm trying to remember his name, Fuya. Yeah, Fuya. Fuya's deck is perfect for that kind of gimmicky instant OTK maneuver. That if it doesn't work, if it works the first time, you're gonna make sure it doesn't work the next two.
Yeah, so because it's like his cards are kind of better in the anime because they're more consistent. But
yeah.
The thing about that is there can also be a thing of that if he wins the first match, and then I guess for example, his Moblin shows up, which then means his confidence in wavers, which means he doesn't actually draw the cards he can normal summon anymore.
Basically, like, the narrative mood affects what cards people are drawing, basically. So, there's some stuff to discuss with that, like, as we talk certain duels, like, are we going to keep that duel? Are we going to keep this duel? How are we going to change this duel? Whatnot. What are we going to talk about? What's Yuki going to play? What would his opponents do in response? Yada, yada, yada. It's basically what it's going to be like once you start talking duels.
It's more about the key points, yeah.
Yeah, it's more about the key points than the overall idea of it, so... We're
not
it's
planning like, I think of, like... Because it's like, I think the only ones that really matter are, like, the Black Red Rancer fight, like that, the tag duel. I feel the Tokunosuke fight would be weird because it literally would just be he wins the one thing, and then Tokunosuke like Yuki has to punch the kid to get his cards back because he won the match, but he won the round but not the match. So he has to get his cards back.
Yeah, so hey, you can't keep the cards back, bitch. Which again, it brings up that weird thing with numbers, since as we remember from the Tokunosuke duel, when Tokunosuke took Utopia and Leviathan Dragon, frickin' Astral ended up in like a fucking cocoon. So that's a strange question to go up there.
The weirdest thing about it is I think that depends on how many. I think you could leverage it depending on how many numbers Astral has inside of him.
Yeah,
because
I think at that point
later on, once he has more numbers inside of him, he can lose matches because it's more of like he just numbers card disappears temporarily instead.
Mm. Yeah,
like you could do a thing of being like Astral tributes Dark Mist every time they lose the first match.
That would actually be funny. Just to spite that guy.
So it would be a recurring bit of being like Astral just quietly stubborn and quietly spiteful.
That would make for something funny.
Like,
okay.
He has been removed from play. Not banished, but removed from play.
Yeah. So next video, since now we're at that whole hour and I don't want to overextend this too much.
Well, I feel like covered most of the points of being like it's about that. It's like I'm just trying to think of like what other duels comes up. But yeah.
So next time we do one of these videos, we'll start getting more into the arc itself and like the key points of going over, because the idea
actually
drastically.
We forgot to talk about Shining Draw.
Oh yeah, we did forget to talk about Shining Draw. Okay, then we'll cover that.
We need to talk about the end because I think that's actually important. Because we need to talk about also the Ws.
Yeah. Again, like I said before, Utopia Ray kind of weird. The ZWs are basically all built to work with it, outside of a few specific ones that say Utopia card, not just Ray. Thank God.
Or the cards that count as Utopia Ray.
Yeah. The idea there, you brought this up, so I think you should be the one to tell it, since you had the big old idea about how Shining Draw would probably be.
The idea I had in mind is how I think this would work is that I'm used to in like other card games is that there are sometimes if you do a certain type of conditions, you reach a super state where you're now drawing from a special card deck full of really powerful cards. So I feel like when Yuki and Astral become ZeXal, it becomes Shining Draw is that it lets him draw any specific ZW card or any specific utopic card relevant to the situation, or it lets him draw from a very specific deck of like 5 to 10 cards that are really powerful.
Rather than the anime shit where it's kind of, oh, just literally
because honestly, the other thing you do is you literally just draw
card, which is, oh boy.
It also shiny draw just be like you always just draw a ZeXal construction so you can search anything you need.
Yeah, this plays into the idea too of what you mentioned about how Yuki's deck changes. Because say if you're running say a pure Utopia deck, you're at least running a couple of the better ZW cards, and you are absolutely at least running it's not Ascended Sage. I think it's Ascended Sage.
It is. I think it's you're running at least the level 4 Sage.
Yeah, you're running at least the level. Well, 2 of them are level 4. I'm pretty sure it's Ascended. It might be the different one. But the one that can special summon itself if your board is empty. Let me just look that up to correct myself.
The combo starter. Yeah, it's like the ZeXal servant.
Yeah, the ZeXal servants, which is like
because you're running the ones except the level 3 one, which is Ouroboros, which is a very specific card, which I think
Ouroboros
is a specific burying card. I think.
Yep. No, I was right. It's Ascended Sage. It's Ascended Sage. Ascended Sage is the combo starter.
I think before that though is that we do a breakout point. I think is like Yuki eventually gets automatic. I think it's automatic.
Automatopia.
Yeah, which is like he gets that card. I think after by Arc 2 as like this is a card of being like after he's gone Ray and after the first ZeXal card. It's like he starts getting the cards that start bridging automats to Utopia cards.
Yeah, basically. Which would make for
also that she's got to get Gaga Magician, but
yeah. Also, like at
she's
some point,
into a Utopia card,
and then at some point he pulls out freaking ZS Utopic Sage because that's actually not terrible in a Utopia deck.
And I'm not sure if they actually play in the anime except for like the final bit or something.
Nah, I think this one came out way later actually.
Yeah, because I guess you could use the later cards of being like there's a bunch of servants, and also like you save all the ZW stuff only for when they are ZeXal, because I feel like what you do is have the ZW cards only work when they're ZeXal, because I think you should just do it where it's like Yuki's hand turns into ZeXal construction. They're just full of ZeXal. It's like legal amount of ZeXal constructions. He has 5 ZeXal constructions in hand now, which means he searches all the ZW cards he needs, and it's not once per turn.
Well, considering whenever ZeXal gets pulled out and some stuff like that, who knows?
Because I feel like that'd be the dumber point, because it literally lets you search one of any 4 types of cards. It lets you search any automats, any ZWs, any Utopia cards, and anything like any actual ZeXal cards.
Mm-hmm.
Which means like that's the same thing as Shining Draw, because it means you search it anyway. It's just negatable.
Something like that. So that definitely make for an interesting thing. So now to actually close out, since we
also
covered
because I think Shining Draw is also a card, is also ZeXal Field. Like there's a bunch of Utopic support that
yeah. To actually close out, the next time we do this little discussion of differences, it'll be more actually getting into the arcs itself, talking about the key points, the key duels, since there's always a focus of the 2 to 3 parters, and then those bits and how characters would interact along with some of the plotline ideas we think could probably be changed around to suit said differences. So
and also maybe like I guess sometimes bring up a dumb bit about maybe also just a dumb thing because this always makes me smile is like maybe like is Yuki and Katori a thing? Maybe it's like
maybe not.
It's like maybe not. It will probably be vague sometimes, but it's like I feel like there will also be moments where it's like you could argue they are, where it's like maybe sometimes they're just like holding hands, or when it's like when it's Geary a girl, he's aggressively flirting with her because to him it's a fun, it's a dumb joke because he's just trying to get at her, but it's like because it's maybe not Katori, she's taking it too literally. So it's like the joke is like you don't know, so maybe, but it's like. It's a bit of being like, it's vague, but it's like, maybe it is. And it's like, maybe like at some point in the series when it gets too real, like they're direct about it. Maybe once they both change as people. But it's like a thing of like, in the current moment for like this bit, for their ages, it'd just be like a vague thing of like, maybe you could argue either way.
Yeah. Okay. And so, again, that's going to be us out yet again. If you want to see some more stuff from me, I stream over on this channel, basically Tuesday, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, or whenever this fancy strikes me, depending on work. Axe is with Studio Mega, so go check those guys out to see them play and to see their progression plays or their Fail Betrayal series where they talk about various Yu-Gi-Oh archetypes and how they kind of either fit certain card aesthetics.
If you play the Progression Attorney, I keep having a situation of I keep winning, but then because everyone's super salty, I feel like I've lost.
And like I mentioned, the Fail Betrayal series, if you want to see Axe and most of the other main guys over at Studio Omega just talk about the different archetypes and
talk about card design and also deck appear, also actual art design.
Yeah,
just aesthetically, but also design-wise. Because sometimes cards look bad but are good, or sometimes cards look good but are bad. Or sometimes they're both just bad.
And sometimes they talk about how cards change between regions. It all depends on what's going on. So, good place to go. So, if you had some thoughts of your own, leave it in the comments. I'll probably respond to you on that since I'm pretty active when it comes to comments or other stuff like that. And we will see you guys next time.